Imagine a continent torn apart by war, then reborn through ideas. Where kings once ruled by divine right, but centuries later, the people questioned everything, even God. Why do modern Europeans value reason, freedom, and social welfare so deeply? The answer lies in a journey that stretches from the Roman Empire, to the chaos of the Middle Ages, and the fire of the Enlightenment. This isn't just a history lesson. It's a psychological time machine into how centuries of empires, revolutions, and philosophies shaped the European mind we know today. Stay with us, because what you're about to discover might just change the way you see the world, and yourself. The foundations, legacy of the Roman Empire before skyscrapers, smartphones, and modern democracies. There was Rome, not just a city, but a blueprint for civilization. The Roman Empire wasn't just about gladiators or emperors. It laid the foundation for law, government, engineering, and even the structure of cities that millions of Europeans still live in today. Ever wondered why European capitals like Paris, London, or Vienna have grand roads, public squares, and central forums? That's the Roman legacy at work. But Rome shaped more than just roads and buildings. It shaped how people think. The Romans believed in order, discipline, and a sense of civic duty. These values were drilled into citizens and soldiers alike. Over time, they became cultural habits that continued long after the empire fell. Roman law, based on logic and structured justice, became the core of modern European legal systems. Even the idea that you're innocent until proven guilty. That comes from ancient Rome. And the Latin language? It didn't die, it evolved. Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Romanian are all descendants of Latin, influencing the way people speak and think across the continent. But Rome wasn't perfect. It was also an empire of inequality, slavery, and military dominance. The very idea of hierarchy, where some rule and others obey, was burned into the European psyche. When Rome fell in 476 AD, it didn't just collapse politically, it triggered a massive identity crisis. Europe was lost in the dark, looking for new meaning, new leaders, and a new future. What came next? 1,000 years of chaos, kingdoms, and holy wars. The medieval mind, faith, fear, and feudalism. Rome had fallen. The order it brought collapsed. What followed was a world ruled by uncertainty and fear. This was the Middle Ages, a time of castles, crusades, and cathedrals. But more than anything, it was a time when faith became the anchor in a sea of chaos. Life was short. Disease, famine, and violence were everywhere. People didn't question why bad things happened, they turned to the church for answers. The church wasn't just a place of worship. It was the center of power, knowledge, and law. Priests read, while kings bowed. And the belief in divine authority shaped how millions saw the world, and their place in it. People were taught to obey, not to question. This mindset, of submission and fear, left a deep mark on the European consciousness. But this era wasn't just about religion. It was also about feudalism, a strict social pyramid where everyone knew their place. Lords ruled over peasants. Peasants worked the land. There was no upward movement, no personal ambition. And yet, even in the darkness, seeds of change were growing. In monasteries, ancient texts were being copied. Trade routes reopened. Cities slowly began to rise again. And most importantly, people began to ask a dangerous question. What if there's more to life than just surviving? That question would lead to one of the greatest awakenings in human history, the Renaissance. The Renaissance, rebirth of reason and individualism after centuries of darkness, something remarkable happened. Europe opened its eyes. The Renaissance wasn't just a return to art and beauty. It was a radical shift in how people saw the world and themselves. Ancient Greek and Roman texts, long buried or forgotten, were rediscovered. Suddenly, logic, mathematics, and philosophy were back in the conversation. But this time, they weren't just for kings or monks. They were for thinkers, artists, and dreamers. A man could now be more than a farmer or a soldier. He could be an inventor, a scholar, a painter. Think of Leonardo da Vinci, an artist, scientist, and engineer. Or Galileo Galilei, who dared to say the Earth wasn't the center of the universe. These weren't just geniuses. They were symbols of a new mindset: question everything, explore everything, believe in human potential. For the first time in centuries, people were encouraged to think independently, to doubt authority, to challenge tradition, and to seek truth through observation, not just faith. Education flourished. Cities thrived. Printing presses spread ideas faster than ever. And perhaps most importantly, the idea of the individual was born. You weren't just a subject of a king or a servant of God. You were a person, with thoughts, rights, and choices. This change in thinking wasn't just cultural. It was psychological. It rewired how Europeans viewed society, morality, and purpose. But with new ideas came tension. As reason rose, so did rebellion, against the church, against monarchs, and against the old world. The Enlightenment, the birth of modern thought. What happens when people start to think freely? When they stop accepting answers, and start demanding them? Welcome to the Enlightenment, the age when Europe traded blind faith for bold ideas. It began in coffeehouses and salons, in the pages of banned books, and in the minds of philosophers who believed in one powerful idea: human reason can improve the world. Thinkers like Voltaire, Rousseau, Locke, and Montesquieu began to challenge everything: kings, churches, traditions. They asked, why should a king rule by birthright? Why shouldn't people have freedom of speech or religion? What if governments existed to serve the people, not the other way around? These were dangerous thoughts. But they spread fast, fueled by printing presses, literacy, and the growing frustration of ordinary Europeans. The Enlightenment planted the seeds of modern democracy, human rights, and scientific thinking. It reshaped education, law, and politics. And it led directly to revolutions: the American, the French, and beyond. But more than anything, it changed how people saw themselves. No longer just subjects or sinners, they were citizens, thinkers, individuals with rights and responsibilities. This psychological shift, from obedience to autonomy, is the heart of the modern European mindset. A mindset that values logic over superstition, debate over silence, and freedom over fear. But of course, history didn't end here. The Enlightenment opened the door, and what followed were revolutions, empires, world wars, and the birth of the European Union. Wars, recovery, and the modern European identity. The Enlightenment sparked revolutions. But freedom, it turns out, is a messy thing. As monarchies fell, new powers rose, empires built on nationalism, industrial strength, and military might. The 19th and early 20th centuries saw Europe explode with ambition and destruction. 2 world wars turned the continent into a battlefield. Cities were leveled. Millions died. And the very values Europe once prided itself on, reason, progress, order, collapsed under the weight of tanks and totalitarianism. But from the ashes, something unexpected happened. Europe didn't just rebuild its cities. It rebuilt its soul. After World War II, countries that once hated each other decided to do the unthinkable: cooperate. The European Union was born, not just as an economic project, but as a peace pact. For the first time in centuries, European nations focused on dialogue instead of war, coexistence instead of conquest. This modern Europe values human rights, social welfare, education, and diplomacy. It's skeptical of unchecked power. It promotes critical thinking, equality, and environmental responsibility. And yet, it still carries the weight of its history. The Roman discipline, the medieval obedience, the Renaissance creativity, the Enlightenment reason, the scars of war, they all live on in the modern European mind. Europe today isn't perfect. But it's the product of a long, painful, and powerful transformation. A transformation that didn't just change laws or borders, it reshaped how people think. And that's what makes Europe so unique. It's not just a place. It's a living story of how history shapes psychology, and how people, generation after generation, learn to rise from the ruins. If this journey through time gave you a new perspective on Europe and how history shapes human behavior, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, and join us as we continue decoding history and science together. Because the past isn't just behind us, it's inside us. Thanks for watching.